What if that shiny new commander you're thinking about building is actually the worst possible one you could choose? Picking a good commander is actually a lot harder than it looks, especially if you're new to Magic, or worse yet, new to card games entirely. And even for those of us who have tons of experience, it's really easy for a commander that's a really bad fit for you to look really good on paper. Now look, I understand how this happens. Perhaps you see a TikTok or YouTube short telling you how broken this new commander is and how you have to build it. Or you search for the best commanders and or look at the EDH Rec Top Commanders list and it sends you down an Dragon shaped rabbit hole. And look, all of these are perfectly fine ways to pick a commander and a deck, and the Dragon is still pretty broken after all this time. I'm not here to tell you that choosing that or whichever powerful commander is currently the flavor of the month, like Azula, is definitely wrong, but I am here to tell you that it might be. Depending on what your goals are, it's very easy to pick the wrong commander, spend a whole heap of money, only to realize after a few games you're just not having fun, or worse yet that you are, but the table hates you for bringing it. Fortunately for you, I've played Magic for far longer than most people watching this video have been alive, and I've built as many good decks as I have bad decks, so I can help you shortcut out the bad parts. Let's talk power, fun, and you as we look at how to actually pick a good commander. We'll start where I think most people do when they're looking at new commanders, and that's power. Because yes, regardless of your bracket or intentions, I'd argue that the commander does need to be good. But good doesn't necessarily mean what most people think it means. I think the single biggest thing that separates a good commander from an average one is whether or not it creates value in a linear or multiplicative way. A linear commander gives you a flat bonus. The worst case scenario is a once-off effect, and as an example, we'll use drawing a card. Rather, a commander should be drawing you lots of cards if it's got a once-off effect. And ideally, for a commander to be even remotely playable, you want that effect to be repetitive either at least once or multiple times per turn. At least then we're getting additive value over time. But the problem with this is that it's still often linear. Linear magic is fair magic, and fair magic has its place in limited formats, but in constructed formats and especially Commander, fair magic is bad magic. For a Commander to be truly great, the value it creates for us needs to be multiplicative. A multiplicative commander is one where each piece you add to the board doesn't just add value in a linear way, it multiplies everything else you're doing. And while this is really a deck building concept, it applies the most to our commander. The Dragon is a fantastic yet simple example here. It reduces the cost of every dragon we play by 1. Dragons are typically very powerful, so being able to cast them earlier creates a lot of value for us. That value is great if we're casting 1 per turn, but even better if we're casting multiple. And because these dragons are so powerful, the compounding effect of this cost reduction is going to add up very quickly, and this is what makes the Dragon such a powerful commander. Obviously, not needing to spend mana on this effect makes it even stronger. If we do however cast the Dragon, we now get multiple multiplicative effects. We get to draw cards equal to the amount of dragons that are attacking, and we get to cheat something into play. And we get to do that all every turn cycle. Pantala's Discover operates in a very similar way, allowing us to cheat in all manner of things over and over again. And if we now add in some flicker effects, we're able to get our effect multiple times per turn cycle as she goes from strong to broken. One of my favorite commanders in Zuladoc operates in a very similar way, cascading twice for every expensive spell cast. This ability is linear but repetitive, but all that free stuff we get will now create additional synergies and value that starts to stack up very quickly. I can't talk about this and not talk about my Sauron deck. Sauron makes the Orc army bigger every time an opponent casts a spell, which has great additive value that is strong because it's triggering so often. The win condition in my deck is blowing up a huge Orc army, but my deck is also built around getting value from my graveyard, and the ring temp mechanic on Sauron means I can cast important spells, then play a ring temp effect, then wheel my hand and do that over and over. All the while I'm filling my graveyard with spells that I get to recast later, pushing the value that Sauron creates into overdrive. If you've ever played a video game where you stack percentage multipliers and suddenly you're doing 10,000% damage, that's what a good commander should be doing in Magic. If you're looking for examples of commanders like this, almost all the commanders I built on my channel have some kind of multiplicative effects going on. And if you watch my videos where I talk about the best commanders from a set or a year, you'll see signs of that too. I will add here that underpinning a lot of this multiplicative nature of these commanders is synergy. And if you're trying to build a wacky or thematic deck, your good can mean achieving the thing you're trying to do rather than assembling a conventionally strong board. The underlying principle though is the same. I'm going to blame this one on TikTok, but I think that when looking at a new commander, it's very easy to be blinded by the highlight reel. Your friends will hate you if you do this one crazy thing. It's the very best case of what a card or deck is capable of, rather than the reality of how likely it is that thing happens. Some commanders have incredible effects if you assemble Exodia, or they stick around long enough to generate value, But what matters far more than that is their flaw. Like, what does this commander do when you have a bad draw? Or what does it do if you don't draw much support pieces? A commander that's insane in 1 out of 10 games, and mediocre or bad in the other 9 is, well, just mediocre or bad. A good one has a high floor and a high ceiling. It's partly for this reason that some of the best commanders, and I'll reference Pantalaza again here, have an immediate effect when they're played. Even if they're removed, you're still going to generate some value. Obviously not every good commander needs to have an enters ability, but the faster that your commander can make an impact on the game, the better. I'll big up my boy Sauron here as an example. Yes, he costs 6 mana, but if he sticks, he's a massive pain to remove, and he can generate tons of value by just sitting there. My Merrin deck is a separate but relevant example. The entire deck is built around her, but if she gets removed, it can still function pretty well. Her presence just takes my game plan from a 6 or a 7 to a 9. And this is sort of the best case scenario, where the floor, even without our commander, is still a playable game. Something else that's important is support density. It's less to do with the commander, but more to do with the cards around it, and it's especially relevant when a commander is tied to an ability or game mechanic that hasn't been printed very much. When looking at a commander, it's worth checking whether the commander's strategy actually has enough cards backing it up to support it before you start building. I come across this a lot when I do budget deck building challenges with my friends, where we build decks where every card costs less than $1. I'll find the sickest commander and then realize there's not enough cards in the card pool to make that strategy consistent or viable. A good commander is now suddenly a bad one. Sometimes not enough support isn't just limited to the number of cards, but whether or not they're good enough or fast enough to support our deck in the bracket or power level we're trying to play it at. Let's say you're building a deck for bracket 3, but it needs multiple 6 mana cards to assemble your win condition. That is going to be too slow and you're going to feel it every game. So before you commit to building the deck, have a quick look at Scryfall and make sure that there are actually enough playable cards to fill your deck at the right power level. If you're enjoying this, I cook up videos like this that'll help you think differently about Commander. Videos that will help you build better decks, play better, and have more fun. If you want more of that, like the video to tell the algorithm that you think it's good, and given we're hurtling towards 50,000 subscribers, subscribe to make sure that my next banger gets delivered directly into your eyeballs. Outside of CEDH, power without fun in Commander is a recipe for a bad time. And I think that too often one can get a little bit lost in the sauce when it comes to chasing power in Commander. Now fun is of course subjective, especially when you compare lower to higher power brackets, but my broad recipe for fun when it comes to commanders and the decks built around them is that you should get excited when you think about sitting down to play the commander that you're thinking about building. Even if you're playing high-powered Magic in Bracket 4, you should get overly excited by the thought of building around or sitting down to play with this new commander. It's very easy to get baited into playing commanders that you're not that excited about purely because they're hyped up or good. Now I feel this point is a little bit obvious, but I still think that it's worth sharing, especially if your playgroup is caught up in a power arms race and you start worrying about playing decks that can keep up. My Dog deck that I recently upgraded to Bracket 4 can at its high points crank out a turn 3 to 4 win. That one kind of needs to be competitive in Bracket 4, but it's definitely weaker and more fickle than most other Bracket 4 decks. That said, I don't care at all, because I'm just so excited about the thought of sitting down to play with that deck that it doesn't really matter whether I win or lose. Like, as I write this, I'm just sitting here thinking, man, I need to get my friends together to play Bracket 4 tonight so that I can play my Dog deck. And honestly, if one's not that excited to sit down and play with a specific deck, why are we even playing a casual, for-fun format that's all about whimsy? Naturally, one's excitement can fade a little bit for a commander or deck as the novelty wears off, which is all just part of the natural human experience. But a good test for me is whether I think I'm going to still enjoy this deck or commander after 20 to 30 games, and if the answer is yes, then I'm probably on the right track. It goes without saying that if you're mostly playing CDH, then this applies a lot less, but even then, you still need to enjoy how your deck plays and the commander that helms it. This thought exercise of thinking whether I'll still enjoy a deck in 30 games is a great test to avoid what I'll call the cruel claw problem. We all have that one friend, and it may be you, that occasionally shows up to play with an evil glint in their eye and a brand new deck. And you likely already know the kind of deck that's about to get brandished. The TikTok deck that promises to ruin your friend's day. A good example is an Oops All Lands Cruel Claw deck that gets built, played once or twice, and then sat on the shelf of shame because as it turns out, no one wants to watch you make the same exact meme play every game. These decks are the Magic equivalent of cranking your hog, and as much as cranking your hog can be fun, almost no one wants to watch you do that, and doing it publicly is a crime for a reason. I find that in practice, the presentation of these decks often goes down a little bit like trying to tell your friends a joke that you heard somewhere. Your delivery probably won't be great, and they probably won't get it. And you're likely going to spend far too much time trying to explain why it's actually very cool and very funny. And all the while, your friends will be wishing that the conversation would move on, or even worse, that you're not there. Now, while most playgroups would hate the above experience, you may have found yourself a merry little band of freaks that would just love it. So it's important to know your audience. Most of us have somewhat defined playgroups, and much like you're probably not going to force your friend who hates drum and bass to listen to Butter Down for hours, you're probably not going to force an experience on your friends they're going to hate, because they'll at best suffer through it and then resent you for inflicting it upon them. Whilst I don't necessarily agree with a lot of house rules that I see, whether it's no Voltron or no winning out of nowhere or no stacks effects, if you know your friends hate, for example, stacks effects, and you've just decided to have a brainwave to build a bracket 3 Grand Arbiter Augustin deck, someone's going to end up on the sad end of that tale, and it'll probably be you. Now, as I said earlier, fun is subjective. And for you, fun may be grabbing a precon, or what is effectively a precon, and just hanging out with friends. Now, that's absolutely fine. But if you're more invested in the hobby, that might not quite scratch your itch, as these experiences can feel a little bit shallow. Some commanders have basically been solved, and the entire deck basically builds itself where there are like 90 obvious includes and no real decisions to make. Pantlaza is probably a great example of this. It's a great commander, it's very fun to play, but the deck almost entirely builds itself. There just aren't that many interesting dinosaur options, and the support cards are fairly obvious. The same is true for many tribal or typal decks, and if you've played Pantlaza, you've played a deck that feels like that, whether it's a dragon deck, a sliver deck, or an elemental deck. There are notable exceptions, like my Ashling combo list, but that is the exception and not the norm. Decks and commanders like this, that can feel predetermined, especially if they have similar play experiences to other commanders, can get boring real fast. Not because the commander is bad, but because we didn't actually get creative, and at least to me, creativity and self-expression is a big part of why I play commander in the first place. If I wanted to net deck or have my deck be pre-built, I would just go and play standard, modern, or 60 card Pauper. And even in Pauper, I prefer a tier 2 slightly off meta deck where there is at least some self-expression rather than just piloting a deck like Mono Blue Terra. Now, we talked a lot about commanders and the decks around them, but who we are playing with is as important as what we are playing with. And it's important to think about a new commander in the context of where and who they're going to be played with. I've talked a lot about starting with the end in mind, and I'll probably make a video all about that topic again soon. But what bracket you're building for is arguably the most important first step here, because not all commanders belong everywhere. Some commanders are simply too strong for lower brackets and will either get you targeted or create miserable games for other players. I occasionally see the sentiment of people saying, "Oh, but I'm the arch enemy and my playgroup loves it." But in almost all of those cases, the person making this claim is the social archenemy, because they constantly bring overpowered commanders or decks that create a miserable experience, and they're blind to the feedback from their friends. On the flip side, other commanders are simply too weak for higher brackets and will leave you feeling like you've brought a knife to a gunfight. This is both bad for you because you probably won't have much fun, but it's also bad for the pod because you're going to create a complete power mismatch. Think of it like this: much like how you could show up to the beach in a suit or your office job in lingerie, you can build a perfect deck and still have a terrible time just because your commander doesn't fit the environment that you're playing in. In bracket 2, I like to bring commanders that can create fun, interactive, and wacky games. In bracket 3, I still like to bring some whimsy, but my decks have to be able to threaten a win by around turn 8. And obviously in bracket 4, throw caution to the wind because anything goes. Archetypes are on top of my mind because of the recent series of videos I made about archetypes after I made the original one about midrangification. When looking at a new commander, try to think about which archetypes in Magic this commander and possible deck can fit into. Sometimes a commander wants to be built in a certain way and will send you in a certain direction even if you're not consciously aware of it. But if you don't deliberately choose one, you can often default into mid-range, and that may do your shiny new commander a big disservice. Archetypes matter because for most of us, whether we're aware of it or not, we likely gravitate towards certain types of play experiences or archetypes because of the way that we think or our experience. Do you want to pressure people and snowball small advantages? Or do you want to react, control, remove threats, and then outthink your opponents? Do you want flexible turns with lots of little decisions? Or do you want to engineer one huge big swing turn that blows the game wide open? Knowing what you enjoy will help you build better decks that align with those expectations, but also will allow you to pick commanders that facilitate all of the above. I've yapped a lot about archetypes recently, so I'm not going to flog the dead horse here, but I've linked to my videos on those topics in the description if you want more yapping specifically about archetypes in Commander. I think this might trigger a few people, but my take is that the format is called Commander for a reason. A good Commander deck should of course be able to function without the Commander, or you have a very watertight plan about resolving and protecting your Commander in a Voltron deck, for example, your Commander should be one of the best cards in your deck that you're the most excited to play. And it's a card that makes the rest of your deck better when you cast it. I see many people hedge so heavily against their Commander being removed that they water their entire deck down. They include backup plans and alternative win conditions, and before they know it, their Commander is just one of the 99 cards rather than the engine that the whole deck is built around. Our Commander is a permanent 8th card in our hand, and this reliability and access is a power that puts us significantly behind if we don't take advantage of it. With this in mind, don't treat your Commander choice like it's just another card in your deck, or like it's just an enabler for the colors you want to play. The decks that I've built that I love the most, whether it's something like Lee, Sauron, or Ashling, are all decks where the Commander is absolutely central to the entire deck, and the deck was designed to get the most out of what the Commander can do. If I were to give you a chronological mental checklist of how I would size up a new Commander, this is what I would do to make sure I end up with a banger and not a cranker. Firstly, does the Commander excite me? Am I excited to build it and excited to tell people about it? And do I think I'd be excited to play it for the 30th time? Then what bracket do I want to build for? Because this affects whether the Commander will be too strong or will be strong enough to survive, both in terms of multiplicative effects I mentioned and the floor that it has rather than just the ceiling. Next up, what archetype is this Commander pushing me towards, or what archetype do I want this deck to fall into? Once I know that, I can think about whether there's going to be enough card support for the deck that I want to build, especially taking power and brackets into account. Will I be able to build a functional deck that can meet the requirements of the bracket, for example, winning by turn 8 in bracket 3? And lastly, is this Commander going to match the freak of my playgroup? Knowing my audience and the sick little freaks that are my friends, is this experience I'm bringing going to create a multi-magic boner, or am I going to end up hog cranking in the corner by myself? There are tons more mechanical minutiae that I could get into when it comes to selecting a good Commander, and I'm not saying that you have to follow each of these like they're gospel, but if you do most of these things, I think you'll end up far happier with the Commanders and decks that you have in your collection. I hope you found this useful, and I'd love to hear your takes on what you think makes a great Commander, or which Commanders have lived up to the hype for you and which ones let you down. Yap at me in the comments or in the base deck department Discord. If you want to support what I do, smash up the like button or head over to my Patreon, and a big thank you for everyone that supports me over there. If you want some personal tailored help, or you're just horribly rich and you want to jettison some money, you can find that over on my Ko-fi, all of which you will find the links to down below the like button. Last but not least, if you like this, go and check out one of these videos if you haven't already, and as always, thank you for being here.